This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you an exclusive interview with Vardhan Shringla, Chief Coordinator for India's G20 Presidency. The interviewer is Ashutosh Shukla, Akashvani correspondent.
Hello and welcome listeners. As you are aware, India is holding G20 Presidency this year. This is the first time India is holding G20 Presidency, and in a significant break from the past when such high-level meetings were the purview of a select few, this time over 200 G20 meetings have been held all across the country in over 50 cities during past few months. India has steered the G20 summit with the motto of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future, emphasizing the interconnectedness of all beings on planet Earth. Now the Leadership Summit is just around the corner, and today we have with us G20 Chief Coordinator Shri Vardhan Shringla to tell us more about this mega event. Welcome to Akashvani News, sir.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. I've been listening to Akashvani on the radio since I was a child, and it's wonderful to be on this program.
Sir, can you tell our listeners briefly about the significance of G20 and particularly this upcoming G20 Leadership Summit?
Well, this is the first time that we have been president of the G20. It's also a very significant event because we have never hosted an event of this magnitude in international arena since our independence. So it is a unique opportunity and one that I think we would utilize to the best of our ability. We have already had a number of G20 meetings, actually almost 200 G20 meetings across the country, and the summit is the crowning glory of our G20 presidency. We are expecting heads of state and government from our G20 partner countries, but also from invitee countries, heads of international organizations like the UN, World Bank, IMF, regional organizations like ASEAN and the African Union, and from every sense of the term, I think this would be really an opportunity for India to showcase the best that it represents in development, in terms of its cultural heritage, diversity, tourism potential. So New Delhi will certainly be in the international limelight during the G20 summit.
So as you mentioned, New Delhi will be in the international limelight, and in the past it has only been New Delhi which has been in the international limelight, but this time you have decided to go all across the India. International delegations have visited even the small towns and cities all across India. What was the thinking behind that, and how did you make it possible to take an international level event to remotest corner of the country?
Well, India is not only the largest democracy of the world, we are also the mother of democracy. Democracy has flourished in India since ancient times, and from our point of view it was important to democratize the G20 process. So when we have such an important international exercise, the Prime Minister's vision was that this should go to every corner of our country, every state and union territory should be represented, and as a result of this I think we have taken the G20 to each and every part of our country, many cities that have never experienced an international event, and from that perspective, having fulfilled the mandate and the Prime Minister's vision for an inclusive G20 process, I can say with some satisfaction that we have covered close to 60 of our cities in this process, and it has been in many senses the finest examples of cooperative federalism. I mean, we are a federal system as per our constitution, and we have seen every state and union territory, municipality, district administration put its weight behind making the G20 a success in their own area. And what is more important is that everywhere we went, the people of that area then looked at the G20 as something that was personal to them. So they became partners and stakeholders in the G20 process. And as a result of both holding meetings across our country and Jan Bhagidari process through which we used University Connect programs, Model G20 in schools, quiz competitions, festivals in our country to take the G20 message to the grassroots levels, I think this has been a very successful effort at democratizing, as I said, the G20 process.
So G20 presidency comes at a time when a lot is changing at a global level. We often hear that a new global order is emerging and the financial center of gravity is shifting to the east, and India will play a bigger role in the international arena. How will this G20 presidency enable all that and to enable India to reclaim a bigger global role, and how does India see itself in taking up that role?
Well, our philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam really encompasses our worldview and has always enabled us. This has been the means through which we have engaged the larger world. And in today's context, I think that is more relevant than ever before. We are looking at how we can initiate a new world order that believes in human-centric globalization, in which there is a measure of collaboration and cooperation that has not been envisaged before. How can we, through the G20, assist the global south, especially those countries that are facing acute problems today? So I think this is an effort between the developed members and the emerging economies of the G20. All of us, I think, are in one mind in terms of how we can take the G20 platform to assist countries throughout the world based on best practices, based on concrete achievements that our countries have accomplished, whether it is in digital public infrastructure, whether it is in renewable energy or any other area that the G20 would like to take out and assist other countries. I think that effort has been one that we have fostered through our presidency. And what we've tried to usher in is in many senses a collaborative and new global order in the form of a Vishwamitra, a country that is helping at the global level in keeping, as I said, with our ancient philosophy, but represented and rooted in today's ground reality.
So the G20 event also comes at a time when Prime Minister has given a blueprint for seeing India as a developed country by 2047, and India is supposed to be entering Amrit Kal of development. How would partnerships that are forged during G20 are going to help India achieve that goal?
So all the elements that are essential for our rapid development leading to our becoming a Viksit Bharat or a developed country by 2047 are also already implicit in the G20 process. If you talk about the fact that Youth 20 is an important component of the G20's engagement groups, mobilizing youth and channelizing their energies in a positive direction which is oriented towards your priorities and global priorities is important. The second, of course, is Business 20, where businesses at a global level come together. We just saw the recent Business 20 summit, which is a very successful exercise in which a large number of global business representatives came to India and essentially fostered a lot of exchanges in the business sector. You have the Startup 20, which represents in many senses the cutting edge of our technologies, especially pioneered by youth and younger people. So Startup 20 is India's initiative in the G20. It didn't exist before. We proposed it and all members are now accepted the Startup 20 as a new engagement group within the G20. So in that context, whichever area you take, whether you take energy, you take trade and investment, you take all the different components of the G20, these are the ones that enable you to engage globally in terms of achieving your larger goal of becoming a developed country, of continuing your high rates of growth. I mean, today India is the fastest growing large economy in the world. How can we continue to sustain that growth? And to do that, you need linkages with the rest of the world. You need secure, reliable and resilient supply chains. You need to have opportunities to access markets abroad. But you also need opportunities for your younger people in terms of the services they offer. If you looked at the recent growth in the first quarter of this financial year, it is the services sector that has powered that growth. So what can you do to continue to give them more strength to be able to not just power our growth, but power the growth of the rest of the world? So global growth powered by Indian technology and Indian youth is one that we have to see as a possibility through the G20 process. So I think G20, and especially our presidency of the G20, has not only given us the platform through which we can share with the rest of the world our philosophy of working collaboratively towards a future that involves the entire mankind. So one earth, one family, one future. But also how we can use the G20 engagement to foster our own goals, such as becoming a developed country by our 100th anniversary in 2047.
So the world has been rapidly changing, especially in the past few years since the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic and Ukraine-Russia conflict, and we have also seen emergence of new technologies like artificial intelligence. There has been an immense focus on transition to green energy and sustainable development. All these bring major changes that are going to affect lives and economies throughout the world. And how would G20 outcome document, what are the expectations from it, and how is expected to steer transitions in these areas?
Well, you're right in saying that the world is witnessing an unusually rapid transition not only in terms of energy and technologies, but also in terms of the way what is called the future of work, the way people actually approach the work sphere. And I think it is important that we are on top of that. As a country that accounts for 1/6 of humanity, one of the largest economies in the world, we need to be on top of that process. In other words, we need to input and contribute to that process and shape it in a manner that is conducive not only to us but also the rest of the world. So when you talk about new technologies, artificial intelligence, you talk about cryptocurrencies, the G20 is working to provide a level of global governance for such new technologies that hasn't existed before. So under our presidency, we are discussing with our G20 partners what can be a responsible use of artificial intelligence. How can we have a system through which we can govern cryptocurrencies, not just from the point of view of financial stability, but also in macroeconomic stability terms, which is our priority also. How can we look at the entire narrative of moving towards cleaner, greener technologies? And in that regard, you've seen the Prime Minister's vision for a lifestyle for environment, which is basically a focus on how we can have sustainable consumption, sustainable production that is in line with today's world where we are consuming more than we can sustain. And I think what we are looking at is a people's movement, a pro-planet people who can contribute towards a more sustainable lifestyle. So lifestyle for sustainable development, waste to wealth, emphasis on circular economy, blue economy, the issue of non-use of plastics, all of these are very important from environmental terms. How can we control that narrative in terms of climate change? Climate change is not just climate actions, which is important by itself, but it also involves every individual doing his part to contribute towards a better future environmentally. So these are very critical. And the challenges, of course, remain. As you said, we are emerging from what has been one of the greatest disasters in the form of COVID-19. The Ukraine conflict is still currently on, their own impact on rest of the world, whether it is in terms of lowering growth, increased inflation, but also very high cost of essential imports, whether it is the food that we import, whether it is the energy that we import, whether it is fertilizers. So what can we do to elevate those concerns through the G20? So one of the ways we are saying is that we strengthen multilateral development banks, try and give them a greater mandate but more resources to be able to alleviate the situation of developing countries that face an issue of indebtedness. We as a country have also worked within the common framework to provide relief to countries that are very badly affected by the issue of mounting debt. I think concrete examples which were cited were those of Zambia, Ethiopia, Ghana. We had contributed outside of the common framework. That means where we have not worked within a framework that is already existing. We have worked with partners in cases like Sri Lanka, and where outside the common framework we have contributed towards alleviating the debt crisis of our immediate neighbor, Sri Lanka. So we have to work towards ensuring that the world is a better, safer place through measures that we can take not only in terms of global governance but actual contributions to that process, and how we can actually work in real terms to alleviate the situation of many of our partners in the global south.
So you mentioned about change required in global governance. How would these rapid changes in technology and economy and climate are going to affect the global governance, and what are the changes that would be needed, for example, in the financial architecture or the geopolitical architecture?
Well, I did mention about the multilateral development banks. These Bretton Woods institutions that have been a product of the post-Second World War era functioned largely well in the first 50 years of their existence. But in the 21st century, clearly they are not being able to live up to the requirements or the expectations of the global south. And we can enhance their mandate, give them, as I said, the ability to extend greater resources to help these countries. I think it would be an important aspect. You mentioned climate change also. While it is incumbent in all countries to move towards a greener energy transition, you need the means to do it. Debt crisis means that you are narrowing the fiscal space available to invest in the SDG process. And therefore, I think you certainly need to work with the multilateral banks to strengthen them so that they can contribute to climate financing also. So this is just an example that you had given, and I'm responding to that.
So thank you for joining us on Akashvani News. This has been a very enlightening discussion with you. I hope our listeners would really enjoy it.
Thank you very much for having me on Akashvani. It's a pleasure.
You were listening to an exclusive interview with Vardhan Shringla, Chief Coordinator for India's G20 Presidency. The interviewer was Ashutosh Shukla, Akashvani correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, news on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.
This is Akashvani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on India's remarkable economic growth and Q1 growth data highlights.